All right, this is Dr. Anya, and let's talk about launch management. This is part of product innovation course, and I would like to jump ahead and focus on launch management before you really decide on soft versus hard launch, because that is usually what most innovators ask me about. Oh, how should I launch? um, which strategy should I pick? To be honest, in my business, I usually use soft launch. So I sort of quietly, slowly release the product, see how it does. And if it doesn't do well enough, I should probably invest some dollars into it. And then if it's not doing well, kill it. The bigger companies do a little do typically hard launch with a lot of fanfare, and it's coming in 6 months. It's going to be here before you know it. But this is not really what I want to talk about. It's not about the building, the thrill, the excitement about the launch, but something far more important that you need to be doing from strategic perspective, and it's managing for potential disasters. So let's get right into it. All right, so here we go. Launch management concept showing remedial action. So from launch, this is launch. Before your launch, now you can be spending some marketing dollars and bring in the awareness, but typically what we're going to start here with the launch, right? So percentage of people who are aware, of consumers that are aware, percent aware who have tried the product. Here's your plan, right? Then here's as of now. And this is your goal. You always have to have set goals and objectives that support the goal. And you have to have 6 months. So the now, let's say it's already after your decision of a launch, 6 months. And so you planned to be somewhere here, but actually you are right here, right? If you take the action because you have launch management plan prepared, you will remediate the action or the problem, and you can actually solve it and reach your goal. If you do nothing because you don't do any tracking, which I'll talk about, you won't reach the goal and you sort of will flop. Well, maybe not entirely, but you're not going to reach your potential. Okay, so this shows what you really need to do, or that you really need to have a plan in place in case you are not reaching your goals. And you can track it from day one, and you should have really goals set at each sort of step or each time interval. And if you're not meeting them, then there should be a permission for some wiggle room. But if you're far below what wiggle room allows to be after your launch, then you really have to take remedial action to have still the opportunity to reach your goal. Otherwise, you won't. Okay, so how it's done. So what does the launch management system do? It spots potential problems, select those to control, consider expected impact and damage, certain issues or potential problems. They show up and they're fairly easy to solve. If you are really on top of your entire management and you track and you see what is going on. And so some correction can be done relatively easy, and they do not carry a main impact or threat or damage, right? Potential damage. Others can be quite damaging, not only to the sort of potential success of a product, but to the business, the entire organization as a whole. So you need to develop contingency plan for the management problem. So you need to, just like with a crisis management plan, any crisis that every organization should have, so management crisis plan for any crisis, you need to have a contingency plan for the management of problems during and after launch are associated with the innovation that you're launching. You need to have a tracking system in place, various variables, measuring how you're going to measure, and the trigger points. So, trigger points, something that I just mentioned, if you're doing far below what you would expect per your goals within a certain period of time. Okay, so let's get into it. So, how do you spot potential problems? Problem section often comes from situation analysis. So you should have done situation analysis, and I talked about situation analysis in the past, and strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Problems usually comes from those areas. So you're maybe you don't have enough finances, right? Maybe you don't have enough people, so your human resources are your weakness, and that typically tends to show during the launch or shortly after. You can do a role play in terms of competitors can do or will do. Competitors are not going to sit on their behind and just watch you succeed. They're going to want to take action. Some action that competitors can do is either, try to innovate themselves and come up with a better product, but that will probably take time, or come up with a similar product to yours, which is probably going to be less time than an innovation wildly different from your innovation, right? Competitors could cut prices and uh, on their own product and run promotion to kind of take the attention away from your innovation back to them if they're selling something cheaper. Look back over all the data in the new products file. You should have by now created a whole lot of documents um, preparing you for launch. So see if there are any areas. Maybe you had um, you know, at some fuzzy gate, you didn't have a no go. Uh, you sort of had a maybe go ahead with caution, and you didn't solve a problem from that point, and that is coming back to bite you because you moved on with the product or a project and didn't solve a problem that was sort of a red light, but you still moved on. Consider hierarchy of effects needed to result in a satisfied consumer, and I'm going to show you that right now. So here is your potential target market, potential buying unit. So typically size of your customer base or even a target market. And we know that mostly because, we have census and other source of data. What is the percentage of people actually aware of the product? Here's the biggest problem with smaller innovators is that if you do not have financial backing for marketing, then there isn't probably a whole lot of people actually aware of your product. That is the case with my business. Let's be honest. Most people are not even aware I exist. Out of those people who are aware and are purchasing, I have fairly high percent of purchases, right? If we compare to competitors and their percent of customers or target market that are aware of their existence. Okay, but in many instances, they're not aware is the problem. Then the next step, as you can see, the T part is willing to try the new product. So willing to take the risk and try the product. Think about it with the respect of risk, but from the perspective of risk, and also think about now what is happening now. We have it is June 2020. We are actively in a recession. So what happens in recession? Customer spending goes down because the uncertainty is up, right? As the uncertainty goes up, our spending goes down. So people who are nowadays in the recession willing to try the new product take a risk, right? So if you're innovating now, I'm not saying don't innovate now, not at all. I'm not saying this. In fact, there are many innovations in very strong companies right now that have started during past crisis, right? So, but that means that if customer is willing to try, that is a serious commitment on the customer part. The next A of the ATAR model. So find product in the stores. So the availability is the availability of product. So I'm not in many stores, so it's hard to get my product unless you order online. So that's sort of the boutique part of it. And then like the product enough to rebuy it. I'm fortunate enough to have high percent repurchase rate, but again, this is sort of where you always want to be, have a high percent repurchase rate, so rebuy. But it really all starts broad with a potential target market and narrows it down. Here is another way of looking at it. So how many people are aware versus unaware? And many smaller businesses that do not have a lot of marketing dollars, this will flip. The problem associated with the goals like this, right? The goals you had and actual, so your plan versus actual, when you underperform, often is related because you have high percentage of unaware versus aware. Okay, if you have relatively high percentage of aware, then there will be, just from a numbers perspective, and assuming that you haven't done anything really majorly wrong, you will have high percentage or high raw number of people who try versus not try. Now, if you have a high percentage of people who are aware and also high percentage people who have not tried, then you probably are doing something wrong with the marketing. Now, it is always normal that from the people who are aware, a good chunk never buys. That's the way it is. However, now we're going into the really super important part. Out of those who tried, how many people are willing to repurchase or reuse again versus not come back again? Now, if you have high percent of those who are not willing to come back, repurchase, reuse, then you have a problem. Then probably the product is below expectation. Now, at that point, I want to recommend that you watch my expectation video, Managing Customer Expectation, because that really deals with that. Out of those people who are aware, will be more likely to try if you manage their expectation correctly. And out of those who try, if you manage those expectations via marketing right, they will be satisfied and therefore more likely to reuse. Now, if you promise people, so you raise their expectation beyond what you can actually deliver because somebody told you that marketing is about scamming people into buying, which it is not, then they will not come back. You just have to be very honest in your marketing and manage those expectations correctly. So again, please watch the expectation video and it will make a lot more sense as far as this particular slide. All right, so decision model for building launch control plan. So full set of possible negative events. So you basically are trying to come up with, okay, what can happen? Now your SWOT analysis will greatly help you with what can happen, right? Or your situation analysis, because you can see your weaknesses and then threats out of the environment. Those negative events with enough impact toward investigation. So which ones are likely to actually be threatening to the well-being of or the success of your launch and the well-being of your organization. Those negative events that are so weighted with probability and damage that they must be given special consideration. Those negative events, okay, sorry, those that cannot be contingency plan in any way from different now, and those that will be given contingency planning. Those that will not be tracked and those that will be tracked. So you're basically going from the top of all possible what can go wrong, so all possible problems, and then you sort of have to go from priority list. Minor, you may just kind of watch it but not do much, but those that have a major potential negative consequences, then you have to act and you have to track. Okay. So select the control event. So of all potential problems which have enough impact toward investigation, which should be given special consideration and should be given contingency planning. So maybe create an entire crisis plan for this. And then which of those need to be actually tracked, kind of watched their impact. Okay, so like I mentioned in the previous slide. So here's the expected effects matrix for selection of control events. Potential damage is noticeable. You know, typically you notice a damage, but if it's so minor, then you probably don't worry about so much. But I would still keep an eye on it. So noticeable, harmful, and finally devastating, and then likelihood of occurrence, low, moderate, high. With the darker one, so devastating but low likelihood, you're alert about it, you watch it, you may track it. Okay, so all of these. So high likelihood of occurrence and just noticeable damage. And then here, these are your control variables where you have moderate likelihood of occurrence but devastating results, and high likelihood but harmful. And here, when you have the worst case scenario, devastating and high likelihood, you do not wait. You have to act right away. So what about those contingency plans that I talked about? So is there anything that can be done, right? In some instances, there's not much you can do other than sort of prepare the best you can, right? If there is a major natural disaster coming, I mean, seriously, hunker down, right? I mean, this is an extreme example, but we have an extreme example right now where coronavirus, right? No, I don't want to say nobody predicted it, but let's say we've been oblivious to the warning signs that were coming and didn't pay so much attention. And suddenly the threat to our launch, if you were trying to launch earlier, became sort of imminent, and the damage was probably great because suddenly people shifted toward thinking about toilet paper and flour and yeast, right? Somewhere in March. So really, sometimes there's something you can do, sometimes there isn't much you can do other than maybe slow down or have some sort of plan in place. So what if you're not reaching those goals from slide 2, right? Your actual state versus your planned state. You can competitive price cut, right? You can imitate. So like if you are the one who launch a product, then your competitor may imitate, may try to sort of catch up with you, and vice versa. If you are responding to competitor who launch, you may imitate. Okay, next. Base contingency plan on top of a problem. If it's a company failure, inadequate distribution. So, for example, if we go back to this slide, the availability. If the product is not available, if the customer cannot get their hands on the product, then it is company failure, right? So you have to take specific action to remedy this problem. Where is my slide? If it's a consumer failure, low awareness of trial, so you will have to spend more dollars on increasing the awareness and sort of pushing for trial. Maybe you need to reduce risk. So money, no questions asked, money back guarantee, return for 60 days or more, no question asked. Whatever that may be, you may want to consider reducing risk so that would be more likely to try. Perhaps sampling method is always a great method for getting customer to try the product. Even the best top companies, especially in the beauty industry, L'Occitane, send me out samples to try products. So, everybody does it, all the way up to luxury brands, or more luxurious brands, I should say. And you can take action, right? Next, you have to track. So certain problems will track, certain we may just not sort of let go. We keep an eye on all the problems, but certain areas require more tracking than others. It needs to be relevant. The variables that you're trying to track need to be relevant to your to the well-being of a success, or to the likelihood of success of a problem, of a product. Relevant to the well-being of a business, basically relevant, right? We cannot track everything out there. You have to be able to measure. If you want to track it, you have to be able to measure it. Without measuring, no tracking. So every time when we say track, you have to envision how. Are you going to do conversion rate? Are you going to basically track clicks, but how much time people spend, how many visit the cart or put product in the cart, how many check out, and how are you going to deal with those who leave the cart behind. And then predictable. All right, select the trigger points. So in the earlier slide, I said for every step, for every part of your plan, let's go back to this for a minute. So you have here time. For every sort of amount of time, you should have, so maybe every week, every month, whatever that interval may be, you should know where you want to be on that goal, right? To be on the path to reach that goal. If you just around it, just kind of hovering around it, you'll be fine. But maybe you should have a trigger set for certain percent below where you need to be to stay on track. Okay, so we tend to use colors. So you're in the green when you ride on track, orange or yellow where you kind of off track but still within the appropriate range, and then a red, of course, when you're outside of that range and then you have to really act. Okay, so have the trigger points, and I cannot tell you what the triggers would be because every plan is different. Your goals and objectives will be different, so you have to do your own predictive analysis here. And advertising weight versus awareness created cumulative gross rating points and percentage aided brand awareness. So there's something I do need to mention whenever you have new product. At the beginning of a new product, pre-launch and early stages, majority of focus is on advertising, right? Advertising those. You have ads. Actually, nowadays, we use influencers, send out stuff to influencers again, it depends sort of on the product, but you may go to influencers so they create buzz, right? So at the beginning of it, most of it is sort of advertising driven. Now, influencers, is considered sort of word of mouth, but it becomes really like an advertising. In fact, it's just, nowadays you're required to, or influencers are required to market a sponsor post when they're actually receiving money or free product. But the point I'm trying to make at the beginning and pre-launch and at the beginning, right after launch, majority of your money and types of marketing is going to go into sort of paid advertising. Later, um, into this sort of early majority of diffusion of innovation, you will have a lot more word of mouth. People are aware of the product at this point because you have done a good job advertising in early stages and doing the influencers if that's appropriate for your business. And so the later you are in the diffusion innovation, the more of a word of mouth and less of a one-way advertising, one-way communication it becomes. Okay. Hopefully you find this helpful as far as your launch management. Remember, you have to plan, you have to expect some problems. They tend to be tied to your situation analysis, and that kind of makes it easier, right? Because you already highlighted your problems, and therefore you should be expecting that if any negative situation arises as far as your launch, then it probably will be related to those weaknesses and threats that you already have done in the past, and it will make it easier to plan for it and take corrective or remedial action to get back on your track to the goal of where you want to be within 6 months from launch. All right, that's it for now. I hope you found it useful. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.